Oh, shit. Got it. Status, details, Wi-Fi status, Ethernet on, Wi-Fi off. Ah. Cool. Yeah, I'm good. Good, thanks. Sweet. All right. What's going on? My name's Alex. I go by Blink or Audible Blink online, and we're going to talk about leveling up with CTFs. All right. So people say you got to start with a quote or some clever gifs. So I ended up finding this, and it held up to be true. So sometimes you win, sometimes you learn, and the truth of the matter is, sometimes you don't win in CTFs, but the positive is you always learn something, and so that's great. Just the agenda real quick for this talk. I'm going to do a really quick introduction to CTFs for those of you that are unfamiliar. And we're going to go over some like learning stages. We're going to talk about deliberate practice because we're all craftspeople and we are trying to hone our craft, and that's why we're here. We're going to talk about after action analysis. So learning doesn't stop with the flag. That's only the beginning, and we're going to talk about what that means and kind of go after or talk about a framework. And then we're going to do a demo of a CTF event, and we're going to apply that after action analysis to that demo, and we're going to go really quickly over some resources. So, capture the flag. What are they? It's a collection of challenges designed to test skill, and those skills include things like reverse engineering, web app exploitation, crypto, which stands for cryptography, in case that wasn't clear, forensics, exploitation, steganography, and OS and network. So, great, it's a game, it tests my skills, how do I win? So you usually do it by collecting flags or running up some score, some scoreboard is involved. Flags look like this, or truthfully, they look like whatever the CTF rules say they look like. You can find them in documents, sometimes you'll have to crack passwords, and the plain text password of the cracked password is the actual flag. You can find them in logs. You can find them in database tables or network packets, so not on the file system at all, at least in not a readable form. Sometimes they're in audio files, sometimes they're in metadata, or sometimes they're in the audio files themselves. One of my favorite flags that I've found was on this box. You get a shell in a box, and there's these two files called, like, I forget what they're called, 1 and 2, but you play them, and they're essentially Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. They sound identical. The hashes are different, so you know something's different. Bang in my head for about 6 hours. I eventually throw my noise-canceling headphones against the wall because I'm so frustrated. I don't know what to do. And out of just like nowhere, I have the thought, how do those noise-canceling headphones work? Well, they work by taking a waveform, right, of your audio, and there's a microphone on the outside, and it inverts the audio from the outside and plays it into the headphones, and it cancels the noise outside. So I was like, wait a minute, no. So I go and I download the 2 files, I pop them into a Audacity, which is an audio tool, and I invert one of the waveforms. And there, plain as day, is a human speaking the flag out. I was like, who made this? This is insane. But that was really fun, and it was just like last-ditch effort. Just got lucky that I had that thought right as I was about to give up. So getting started. Understanding how you learn. There's so many topics, and it's such a deep rabbit hole to go down pedagogy, the science of learning, and how many different learning styles. So this isn't that, right? I recognize the verbiage is a little bit similar, but this is just kind of a separate framework. But it's very fascinating if you ever want to get into it. So learning stages. Let's take a test case. Who's heard of a cinema before? So a cinema is this really cool service. You run it in your terminal, and it starts recording both your input and the output, and it does it with like timestamps. Every keystroke is timestamps. So when you replay it later, it's actually all the pauses you take, it takes. It's really nice. It's like watching a live terminal session. And the best part is when you replay it, it's text. It's not video. So you can actually copy-paste commands, and a lot of companies will do this to like demonstrate how to use their tool or something like that. So test case, the cinema, I'm going to say, let's find something there, right? And just to be clear, this doesn't work anymore. A cinema's fixed this, even though this used to be thing. So this has been remediated, but we're going to talk about it kind of after the fact. So the different learning stages with our test case as a cinema. These, by the way, are in no particular order. They're not linear either. This could be a cycle. But are you an answers first kind of person? If I say to you, find sensitive data on a cinema, and you have no idea where to start. Some people will be like, well, I just need an answer first. Tell me how you would do it, and then I'll work backwards from there. So this is what an answer would look like. And the benefit of this is you can start to formulate questions that you couldn't ask before because you didn't know enough about the problem. So if we see in line 3, lines 1 through 3, we're just declaring some variables. And in line 3, we see that there's an AWS access key. So that starts to make me question, well, where did this person find that? Should I look for this instead? And then in that pursuit of finding that bit of information, you might learn a little bit more about the problem. And now for the next time you run into something like this, you can start to ask better questions or have a better intuition of what to look for. Right, and then we just iterate from 10,000 to 100,000, and we use curl to get that endpoint using the AWS access key that we found. And then we just grep for like the word private in all caps for maybe somebody catted out their private key accidentally in one of these and uploaded it. Right? So this doesn't work anymore because they don't sequentially number their IDs. They've redone it so that everything's a UUID, so you can't iterate like this anymore. Are you somebody who wants a practical application first, right? So you don't want an answer, but you don't want to go back and read the HTTP spec, right? The basics to get at this problem. So I say to you then, to the practical application first people, find sensitive data on a cinema.org. So that's a specific request. And then I say, I'm going to give you a hint. I'm just going to say the word IDOR. Have at it. Right? So I don't know what IDOR means. I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to see that it means, it stands for something called Insecure Direct Object Reference. That's going to lead me down a rabbit hole, and eventually I might be able to work myself up to the solution in the first block there. The other thing is, are you a basics first person, right? Are you like you academically want to understand everything that there is about this problem before you attempt to attack? And some people are that way. All right, so for those people, go ahead and read the RFC for HTTP. It's a fun read. You could read Roy Fielding's dissertation on the architectural styles and design of network-based software architectures, where he first introduces the concept of representational state transfer, or REST, as we all love and know. That seems like a lot, but for some people that's right. And it's also, because I said it's not linear and cyclical, once you solve a problem like this, let's say you want to find a new TTP, right? It comes back to basics first. If you want to find something that nobody else has found before, you got to know how the thing works. So again, not linear and cyclical. Regardless of your styles, I just want to say you have to understand your tools. It's the most important part of this whole thing. This is something that applies to everybody. You don't make it easy for yourself to learn. Right? You want to eliminate any unnecessary cognitive load. Right? Don't fight your tools. Have you guys heard of those those boot camps that teach you how to code? They say they teach you how to code in like 12 weeks or 15 weeks, something like that. Right? What language do they usually teach? What are they teaching? Ruby, right? So Yeah, JavaScript is another one. They use Ruby, so those curriculum developers chose that very specifically, not because Ruby's great or it's fast or it's ubiquitous. It's none of those. Well, maybe the great part, depending on who you are, but it's not. You cannot argue that it's fast or ubiquitous compared to everything else that's out there. They do it because they understand this concept of not fighting with your tools. You're trying to introduce a new concept, which is just programming as a whole, not abstracted, right? Logic, loops, control flow, all that. If you're trying to learn that and understand like JavaScript's asynchronous callback nature and its event loop, like I don't need any of that right now. I can learn it later. To be effective, I just need to learn an if statement, right? And an easy one at that, because Ruby is very syntactically just nice and readable, and there's not a lot of syntax to fight with. So don't be afraid to use man your tools, -- help all the things. And a really good resource to learn your tools as well, if you don't just want to sit there and read man pages like me. Overthewired.org, the war games there, they're not all security related, but they all do require that you understand the tool that they're trying to teach you. And so oftentimes you'll find yourself Googling certain things to like tackle that specific problem, or reading the man pages. We also want to get into deliberate practice. So hone your craft, right? Be your tradespeople. Be cognizant and protective of your craft and learn it really, really well. So vulnhub.com, if you haven't heard, is a fantastic place. People create intentionally vulnerable machines, and they upload them here as virtual machines, and you can download them and attack them locally. This is how I got started, and it's just one of the many resources. But as long as it's not one of the new machines that came out like this week or the last week, there's write-ups, and you can choose to click into them and read them. Now, if you're here to learn, resist the urge that this is cheating, right? Don't bash your head against the wall trying to figure out a machine if you're not there at that level yet for this particular topic that the machine is trying to teach you. So the way I started was I pretty much just read them as instruction manuals. The walkthroughs, I would take it side by side, and I'd be like, okay, curl this, okay, right there. Robots.txt, I don't know what robots.txt is. Okay, cool. And that's a thing that I now know, right? And so you're starting to get this flow. You see the decisions that people make when they encounter a problem, and now you know what tool to reach for, right? So do a couple of them. Just even if you think you can move forward, don't. Just treat them as an instruction manual. After about 4 machines, you start to get a feel yourself for what kinds of problems can be solved with which tools. So at that point, try again. Try to do it by yourself. I still couldn't do it at this point, but what I did was I opened my browser window so it was like an inch or maybe 2 tall on my screen, and I would creep scroll just enough to unstick myself, right? I don't want to spoil myself, but I want the line that says, oh, this tool can do this, or this concept or this protocol is what's being used. Like, okay, cool, I'm unstuck. I can now move forward. And then after that, another 4 machines, maybe I had 8 or 9, maybe you can do one finally by yourself without any help. And that's a good feeling. Find ongoing CTFs. Hack the Box. You guys heard of hackthebox.eu? It's a fantastic place. I'm a former software developer. Just to see these guys come out of nowhere and produce like a rock solid platform, really stable, and the iteration of like new features and how solidly they all roll them out, it's like, it's nice. They're really, really good. I can really appreciate the stuff that I know, having had that background, is going on behind the scenes. So they're great. Find ongoing or find CTF archives. So if a CTF ends, oftentimes they'll have archives where you can go back and do some of those challenges. At that point, the moratorium's been lifted. You'll find write-ups and things like that. Social learning, not for everybody, but for the people that are social learners, it's an extremely powerful tool. So go to live events like the one across the hall and upstairs over there, and just talk to people, solve something, and then talk to somebody else about how they solved it. There's a lot of learning opportunities in finding different approaches to the same problem. And then there's, for communities, you can just hit up meetup.org. You'll be surprised. There's sometimes somebody's hosting a CTF event at their own home. They've got some Vulnhub boxes like on a local server, and they've just invited people over and they work on them together. Another one is NetSec-focused Mattermost, so chat.netsecfocused.com, ran by TJ. Is TJ here? What up, TJ? It's a fantastic resource. They used to have about 8,000 people on Slack, and they migrated over to Mattermost because there was a lot of really good knowledge being lost to Slack's 10,000 message limit. So that's a great resource. Talk to TJ if you want to learn more about that after the talk. So learning doesn't stop with the flag. Let's keep it going. How many ways can I explain my solution? So finding multiple ways to explain a single solution forces your brain to like approach it from multiple different angles. It sometimes shines a light on something you previously thought you understood, but actually you just took it for granted. So write it up, pretend it's a pen test report. Write it up, go through the process again in your head, maybe again live, and then just put it down on paper. So that helps you learn. Also, it's a valuable resource for later when you encounter a similar problem somewhere else and you're like, what was that command? You can come back to it now. So how many ways can you solve it? Flag or not, there's probably another vulnerability on this machine that wasn't intended to be there by the box developer. See if you can find that. It's a perfect opportunity for social learning because now you can talk to other people about how you did it, how they did it, and see what's different. All right, so are there any other vectors? What about a different exploit? This is also kind of like similar to teach somebody. You heard that if you really want to learn something, teach somebody. It's because you've got this mental model of how something works, of a concept or a principle, and you've got it on this shelf behind you and you understand it, right? But now you need to teach somebody how it works, and you take it off the shelf and you're like, here's my knowledge, right? You get it? You get it? No? Okay. And then you have to rework it. And in that reworking of this concept and presenting it to somebody else, you're probably going to find a gap somewhere or a crutch. So it's really valuable to just think about the same problem in a different way. See how other people think about it as well. How would you solve this without tool X? This is actually one of my favorite interview questions, right? You start taking away tools from people and you start exposing gaps in knowledge. So you ask, I need to find an SSH server somewhere on this /24 network. What do? Somebody's going to say Nmap. Okay, you can't use Nmap. What do you do now? Okay, they'll either reach for another tool or they'll start talking about like networking. So it's a really good interview question to ask, and it exposes any kind of crutches that you have in that topic. It forces you to reconceptualize that approach. Another fun one is how do I automate this? So this usually surfaces edge cases that you didn't think about. If you're trying to automate something and put it to code, like how do I repeat my steps in code? Again, just drilling in that. How does this work? What are the steps? Like make it an algorithm. Make the solution to this box an algorithm, right? Think deterministically. It's a different way of thinking about the same thing. So show me. Here's the demo. Let's see if I can get the screen right. Nope. I can't actually see this. Shit. Okay. So we've got hack the box. You can't log in, right? You need an invite code. So we're going to come over to the inspector on the right. We're in the network tab. We're going to Send it. Cool. And then you can see here that it says encoded. It doesn't say what it is, but that kind of looks like base 64. So we'll take that bit and we'll go back over to CyberChef. Paste it in there and we've got something. There we go. We'll copy and head back over to the invite code. Go ahead and paste it. Cool. And now we can actually sign up. Don't die. Okay. So let's dog food our own analysis of this, right? First step was explain it. So after inspecting network traffic, some obfuscated code was found. Code brought to attention a function in the global scope called makeInviteCode. This posts to an endpoint. You know what happened? We just did it. I'm not going to read the whole thing. How else can we solve it, though? All right, so this is actually how I solved it the first time. As a former developer, I know that sometimes it's hard, or people just get lazy and put things in the global namespace inside of JavaScript. So I opened up the console, and I literally just went Q, and I looked at all the autocompletes that Chrome told me Q had. Nothing looked interesting, and I went all the way down the keyboard. Of course, M being the last key on the keyboard if you're going top down. Make invite code. Okay, that's interesting. I ran it, and it returned an object, and I saw that, and then from there, it just proceeded down the hill, as it were. I could have used Burp Suite to see any of the calls that were made. I could have brute forced the API, right? If you understand how API, the traditional REST architecture of how URLs are structured and what kind of resources you can access, it's possible with a cleverly formatted word list, you could brute force this and not use a 5,000 word list and still get to the end result. All right, takeaway tools. What if we can't use Postman? Right, we could have used jQuery from within the dev console, just because it's provided to us by the site. We could have used curl directly. We could have used Python's request library or Ruby's HTTP library. Okay, and my other favorite part, automate it. So here we've got curl. We're just going to use curl. There's the first link that we found where you're piping that into JQ, which is a command line utility for parsing JSON, and data.data is the key inside of that JSON object that we want to pull out. Now that returns the actual JSON object or sub-object, which means it includes double quotes. So we're going to pipe that into transform with a tac D for delete, and we're going to delete all instances of double quotes. Cool, and now we've got our base 64 string. So they switch between base 64 and raw 13. That's why this example is decoding with base 64, but similar concept. We pipe it into base 64 decode, and now we have our string with more instructions, right, in order to generate blah, blah, blah. We repeat this process. This time we curl the new URL, and just to get a little bit meta here, I ran man on JQ, and I found command flag tac R, which stands for raw, and it returns your data without any JSON markup. So I have just the blob without the quotes. So I learned that making this slide, just by following the know your tools advice. Base 64 decode, and then we have our invite code. So truthfully, you only need lines 6 through 9 to get the invite code for Hack the Box. By the way, I contacted Chap, and he said this was cool. I know they've tried to keep this secret for a while. So resources. I'm one of those people that gets really overwhelmed when people just dump resources on me. If I ask a question and somebody comes back with a box full of papers and they're just like, here you go. I'm just as lost as I was before I asked the question. So I'm sure there's a lot more resources and possibly even better ones, but I'm just going to go through a couple here. So CTF events and exercises. Carnegie Mellon's PPP CTF team, they're pretty great. And when they graduate, they write challenges for Pico CTF for incoming freshmen to try. So this is cool. I really like their platform, specifically because the hints in it, they're all self-contained lessons, essentially. The hints are reading material to the exact thing you need to know to solve this problem. Embedded security, if you're into that, check out micro-corruption. CTF time isn't really isn't a CTF event as much as it is a global leaderboard. So you can check to see what events are upcoming or which ones passed. They kind of clue you into what's available out there in terms of CTFs. You can also follow teams like PPP and see them on the leaderboards. They're usually at the top. Online resources, VulnHub we talked about, retired Hack the Box machine. So Hack the Box has 20 live machines at a time, and they cycle a new one every week. And once it's cycled, the moratorium on it is lifted, and write-ups and videos become possible. IPSEC is a phenomenal resource. Frankly, I'm surprised he wasn't the teacher before because he's really good at teaching. If a box can be exploited the same way as last week's box, he won't do it the same for the purposes of teaching you a different way. He'll use different tools. Even sometimes if it's not the right tool for the job, just for the sake of learning a popular tool, he'll use it. It's a really good resource. Old CTF write-ups at ctfs.com. All right, here are some resources for learning single-off topics. If you're not the kind of person who gets distracted by tons and tons of resources, then that Trail of Bits CTF is key. So that's it. This talk and the slides, they're viewable in a browser, so you can get it at that link and on 4LEX on Twitter or Blink in the chat rooms. Thanks.